Okay, and then I'm going to press the start webinar button. Okay, so we are now live on YouTube and we have our attendees coming through as well. So welcome everybody to Auditing Third-Party Business Partners for Fraud and Corruption. And we've already pressed the record button, which is good. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are around the world today. I can see a great number of attendees here, and welcome to our Auditopia webinar, our virtual community event. It is Wednesday, the 14th of April in North America, and it is Thursday, the 15th of April down here in Australia. Natasha, if I can get you to move to our next slide. So welcome. If you're new to Auditopia, Auditopia is an online community for internal auditors. It's a place for sharing, for creating connections, and for learning. And on the next slide, I think it's the next slide, I might get Natasha to move on. To get involved, we are going to use the Zoom chat for questions today. So you can jump in using the chat function, or you can ask a question using the Q&A function as well. We'll be looking at both of those. We'll have polls. We want to find out about our audience today and get you involved in the conversation. I know Natasha has some great polls for you. We're going to have a short end of session survey that we'd love for you to fill out. And at the end, you'll have access, for those people who are watching through YouTube, think about joining Auditopia to get access to all of our fantastic internal audit resources. These are generated by internal audit practitioners for internal audit practitioners. So, who am I? My name is Dr. Amanda White. If you're watching this on YouTube, you know who I am. For those people who are new and who've never met me before, I'm in Sydney, Australia, hence it's Thursday at my time. And I'm an ex-PwC and Coopers and Lybrand auditor. I've done financial statement audit, information systems audits, and internal audit. I have a PhD in audit decision-making and human judgment, and I've had 15 years in accounting and auditing education. I create content on Amanda Loves to Audit for YouTube, and I was awarded Best University Educator in Business Law and Economics in Australia in 2020. And I'm also one of the founding members of Auditopia. I'm really excited to be here in this community, and I'm also a full-time professor. I'm a Deputy Head Education in Accounting at the University of Technology in Sydney. So I'd like to now hand things over to our main host for today, our draw card, the fantastic Natasha Williams. Natasha is a powerhouse. You're going to learn so much today. We're going to have such a great time. And Natasha has more than 20 years experience in auditing, accounting, compliance, and risk management. She started in banking, moved to international tax at KPMG, so another Big Four person, and now working in internal audit. She's going to tell you about her work today as an auditor, and you'll get to know more about her as a coach and as a consultant. So I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to hand you over to Natasha. Buckle up because it's going to be fantastic.
Thank you, Amanda. You are far too kind, far too kind. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Yes, so I'm Natasha. I work at Vira Laboratories as Senior Manager of Global Compliance. I have a global team. What's not on this this presentation slide is that I have traveled to 60 countries before COVID and counting, and I have performed well over 300 audits. I stopped counting at 300. So today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to have an icebreaker, which is polling question. I'm going to talk briefly about third-party risk management and performing third-party risk assessments, some contracts, agreements, and audit rights, and why audit rights are important to have in your agreements, and how to create an effective auditing program for third parties. And I'm going to list some common observations and red flags that I have noticed over my tenure of doing these kinds of audits. Okay, so first polling question. We just want to see who's in the audience. So just let us know what your job function is. If you work in audit, whether it's internal, external audit, finance or operations, if you're in legal or compliance, or just compliance in general, or any other field that's not mentioned here. So we give a couple of seconds.
All right, I'll end the poll right there. Most people have voted, and I'm going to share the results.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay. Maybe all that LinkedIn posting help, right? So most of our people are into audits, so that's great. Hopefully, the ones who don't perform audits will still get some benefit from these from the session. So let's see. Go down. Oh wait, it's frozen. Amanda, it's frozen. It won't move to the next slide.
Hang on. Can you move to your next slide now? Nope.
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see.
Oh wait, hold on. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
I remember I had to click into the to the screen. Okay. Okay, we have another poll question. Do you use third parties to sell and distribute products or services? So I'm just trying to see who's here, so to see how the information is going to be relevant to the audience. And if you're thinking about it, I think this session would be very instrumental where you're trying to put together a third-party audit program. And if you currently are using third parties and doing audits, maybe this may be some enhancement to what you guys are currently doing. I know that we're in COVID, so a lot of on-site audits are not possible, but people are moving more to a remote audit standpoint. Hopefully we'll still have some benefit. Okay, great. So hopefully I will be able to provide some valuable insights for you guys who are already doing third-party audits. For those who aren't, are thinking about it, I think you'll still get some value. Okay, third-party auditing is the next frontier in anti-corruption risk management because a lot of companies are going global and there's a lot of international anti-corruption laws that impact a lot of companies, both domestically and those abroad. So I think that it's very important for everybody to stay focused, even if you are not currently working in a global marketplace. Most companies are pushing towards that way, or you're doing some kind of partnership in the future if you're not already. And because of like international anti-corruption laws like the FCPA, the UK Bribery Act, it's getting very instrumental that people really know who the third parties are and the risk that they're taking when they engage in these third parties, because you're ultimately responsible. Okay, so this is a poll question just so I can gauge to see how big the channel is that you guys are working with. So how many third parties do you have in the channel that's used to sell and distribute your products? It could be for products, it could be for services. In my company, we have a little over 1,000 channel partners and more than 100 countries. So that takes, and we have a small team of auditors who are going out to look for fraud and corruption. So it can be very daunting. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so 50%. Okay, so small groups. It's not like in the thousands. This is still going to be valuable to you guys because as your company wants to grow and expand their presence in the global marketplace, you may be approached for your input or to work on some kind of third-party assessment. So these slides will come very much in handy for you guys. Okay, for those of you who have third parties, where are your third parties located? For us, like I said, ours are located all over the world in more than 100 countries. Hence why I've been to 60 countries. And I only count the first time I've been there. Some places I've been dozens of times. Okay, we should have all the results in. Let's see what the results are. Okay, so global. Okay, so it's a tie between global and North America, mostly in Latin America. Okay, great. Fantastic. Let's get to it. Okay, the major objective of a third-party risk management program is to spread compliance to facilitate a successful continued relationship with our business partners while meeting our compliance and regulatory obligations. Now, most before I got into this area of compliance, I used to be an internal audit, and the sales channel was really handling all of the risk management for third parties, which, you know, they're a little bit biased because they don't really want to terminate a relationship because they're getting revenue. And so because of that, they've combined, for at least for my company, the third party risk management with legal and with the compliance group, just so that we can have a lot more transparency. And so that if we got in trouble with the regulators, you know, we wouldn't look like we are putting all of our eggs in one basket, having commercial handle third parties, especially when it comes to conflicts and fraud and corruption. Okay, but it's not just about the books and records. Even though, like, from a compliance standpoint, we're doing audits, we're not just thinking about books and records. We should understand the requirements that we're asking our business partners so that we can better measure them against it. If we don't give them the standards, how are we going to properly ensure that they're following the guidelines to keep us out of trouble, to keep us out of getting fines and having reputational damage? Because, you know, they may be doing something in the marketplace that they were unaware they should not be doing. Now, of course, a lot of this stuff is common sense. However, you know, different people have different levels of what's considered common sense. And what you may think is common sense, other people may have some kind of explanation as to why they're conducting business in a certain kind of way. And in certain countries, it may be an allowable way to do business, but in other countries, it would not be. So that's why we need to make sure that the guidance we give our business partners is clear, is defined, and is measurable. That way we can go in and better assess them, and we can better determine when they're not meeting our requirements. The first way we do this, we start with a third-party risk assessment. This is basically the components of third-party risk management. So what we need to do as a company is to determine the basic need for bringing this business partner into our sphere, you know, of doing business. Because, like I said, we are responsible for them, and all money is not good money. Back in the day, I remember when before we had this third-party risk management program, that the salesperson was just bringing on companies like, oh, you want to be a distributor for us? Come on in. It didn't matter, you know, if they weren't really doing the proper due diligence check or whatever. They were just thinking about the bottom line, the target. They wanted to increase the presence in the marketplace, in the region, by any means necessary. But that brought along with it a lot of risk. They were not selecting the best company. So those situations have changed because we got into some trouble about, I think this is about 8 or 9 years ago now. We had an FCPA violation. This is public knowledge. And then we had to change the way we did business globally because of that. And the FCPA violation had nothing to do with our company. It was not even our company. It was third parties. But like I said, we were responsible for bringing them in. And so we had to take the brunt. And that was a hard pill to take. And $55 million later, and of course, reputational damage that took forever to get over and to explain, you know, if they decided to hire me and to start the compliance audit team. We call it a compliance audit team, but it's basically going to audit these third parties. Now, of course, we have a say in how they get selected. It's part of the, when they're doing the whole channel management function, like this is a wheel of everything that needs to happen before you really engage in channel partner to make sure that this is the best partner for you. Okay, so number 4, we have a contract. You would not believe it, but a lot of people did not have written agreements with some of these third parties, or they couldn't find a written agreement. You know, the days of the handshake is over. You know, you have to have a written contract with terms in it. Audit rights, I call out audit rights here because that's like the crux of any agreement. Okay, you have to have a reasonable pricing model. You don't want to have a discount that's so large that when they buy your product and resell it, they're going to have such a massive profit that they can use the extra money to pay bribes or make facilitation payments or do anything that's going to be illegal. You also need to make sure that not one department is approving these channel partners. There's other eyes. It may be other eyes from different departments. It takes a team. Teamwork make the dream work, as they say. So of course, sales start with it. They identify the business partner, and then they have legal gets involved, making sure the contracts are has all the necessary lingo in it that it needs to have, including audit rights, including anti-corruption language. And then two, you have compliance, who also will review it as well. Then you should have some kind of evaluation mechanism to ensure that the business partner you have brought on, they are in compliance with the agreement that they've signed, and then they are meeting the targets, because everybody should have some kind of matrix. Like every quarter, they should be doing so much sales. If you don't have any matrix, you're carrying on the risk with potential no benefit. You know, if they're supposed to be having at least 100,000 or more based on the size of the company every quarter, and they're only bringing in $10,000 worth of, revenue, you're still carrying the risk, especially if they're in a high risk country. So there should be some kind of performance evaluation and a determination of whether or not we're going to keep this business partner. Then comes monitoring auditing. That's my field where we get into, we're monitoring these channel partners for adverse media, non-compliant type behavior. And we do this remote and we do this on site. And then, of course, there's always a continuous need to evaluate. You're going to look at the business relationship. If we find something through our monitoring auditing that raises concern, even if it's not like an outright corruption thing, but it's a large red flag, then we will, we alert commercial, and then we have a whole nother investigation team that will do a deep dive to do an investigation to see, does this partner bring any risk to us? Of course, at least once a year, you should have some kind of training certification, basically based on if they are agreeing to the anti-corruption terminology that you have put in place. Refresher courses, because you have to tell these people multiple times that they cannot pay bribes. And I know that's funny, you shouldn't have to say that, but let me tell you, if you don't do it, they will say, I didn't know I couldn't do that. I didn't know I could. I've heard some stories, but once you tell them and they sign that they understand in their local language, they cannot say that they didn't know, but they can say it, but then we know this is the paper you signed saying that you knew you couldn't pay those bribes. So anyway, and then every year, I wouldn't say every year, it depends on the contractual term. Sometimes the contracts may be 2 years or 3 years. You should not have these evergreen contracts. We used to have those, we did away with all those, no 10-year agreements. I mean, if the life of the product is 2 years, I mean, if the contract is going to be 2 years, every 2 years, they're on a schedule to, you have to make a decision. You're going to renew it, amend it. If there's some new things that needs to be added to it, or terminate it altogether. Anyway, so this is the wheel, but today I'm only going to be talking about risk assessment and the due diligence process very, very slightly. I'm going to mention about audit rights and why audit rights are important, and I'm going to talk about the monitoring and auditing part.
This looks fantastic, Natasha. A question that's just come up is, in any of this work, do you ever use statistics or regression analysis type of packages to try and do any of this monitoring and checking?
Well, we don't really use a lot of statistics. What we do use, we do have a tool, because when you have over 1,000 channel partners, you're not going to be doing this manual. I mean, even if you have 100, it could just be very laborious to do it manually. So you might need a tool. So we have more than 1,000. So we do have a tool that that's built into our ERP system. And the only statistics that I know that they're doing is based on revenue generation, if they're meeting their targets and stuff. And then, but we also monitor what's going on in the countries itself. If there's some kind of upheaval or something that may impact the business, or if the government has instituted some kind of new anti-corruption law, then it says, okay, then we have to determine which one takes precedent. That's the local law takes precedent over the US law. I'm in the US, so it's the US law, FCPA, et cetera. but we always say, you know what, we always look at both laws and stuff. So there's a lot of monitoring going on, but it's not like heavy in statistics, just because we don't have a lot of data. We just don't have the data. So
fantastic, excellent.
Would be general. No,
awesome. Well, thank you for answering that question that's come up.
Okay, so about the contracts, like I said, the day of the handshake, it's over. You need to have a well-structured contract. Of course, it has to have the services in there that you're providing. The audit clause, let me tell you, a lot of people do not want to have the audit clause in there because nobody likes to be audited. Okay, I know. Not everybody's Amanda who loves audit. Amanda loves audit. Not everybody's like that. And so we try to, explain to them why we have to have the audit clause, because you can ask somebody till you're blue in the face, are you paying bribes? Of course, they're going to say no, even if they just did it 5 minutes ago. So, but you would never know that unless you go in an audit, because you need to be able to check. We trust, and people always say, just trust me. Every time somebody says that, it's a big red flag. My red flag antenna goes off like, woo, 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 because just trust me. It's like, and I say, well, we trust everybody, but we have to verify. Trust but verify. Trust but verify. If you don't have audit rights clause in your agreement, you're not going to be able to go in. I'm telling you, you're not. Even if you have it, they still fight it. But then you have reason to terminate. This is a breach. This is a breach of an agreement. You can get terminated. So, and I've had people who said, okay, we don't care. We want to be terminated. So it's like dodge the bullet, because they probably were doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. Anybody who's going to outright refuse an audit is hiding something. It doesn't mean that it's illegal, because I put it this way. All unethical behavior is usually illegal. All unethical behavior may not be illegal. It could be unethical, but not illegal. But all illegal behavior is definitely unethical. So if anybody's fighting audit, you have to say why. That doesn't have to be they're doing something illegal, but they're doing something probably improper or something they don't want you to see. Okay. Required reporting, they should be reporting back, just so you can manage your risk and stuff. If they're not meeting the criteria you set for them every quarter, you're carrying risk for nothing. Also, you have to make sure that compliance requirements are in your agreement. Like you have to have an anti-corruption clause in the agreement, telling people that they should not be paying bribes, making facilitation payments, or breaking the law. You have to have that in there, because people will say, I didn't know that was not allowed. Even though everybody knows common sense that you shouldn't be doing that, but they would use it. And if you know how we say in audit, if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. There you go. If you have it in a contract, they didn't agree to it. So how can you expect them to not be corrupt? You may have to work with the legal department. Like I said, this takes a village effort. It's not just one department anymore. Legal comes into effect when you need to have a non-disclosure agreement. A lot of times they will sign the contract with audit rights clause, but then they will say, well, we have confidential information. What we're looking at is not confidential. We're looking at expenses. So expenses is not confidential, but they will say, oh, it's privacy, it's confidential, whatever. And so we always say, okay, well, we can sign a non-disclosure agreement. We're not going to share anything that we see with anybody. This is just for our own knowledge, et cetera. And so usually they agree. If they don't want to agree to the non-disclosure agreement, then you have a problem. Anytime there's a breach in a contract or agreement, you have to get legal involved, because legal they have to know the law of the country that you're dealing with. Oh, also too, I would say this: when you're doing the country analysis of whether to bring a business partner on, know the laws of that country. How easy is it to terminate? Because some people, you can get in the country easily and partner with a business partner, but to get out, you have to pay a whole bunch of money to get out. Even if they're found guilty by their own government. We had this situation. They were found guilty by their own government. And then if you try to end it, they were like, oh, well, you know what? It wasn't that bad for you to just terminate without paying. So you might have to pay, it could be up to, for lost revenue, 3 years worth of revenue that they would have had if they had kept the agreement. So you have to work with legal to make sure that getting out of agreements is easy. Because don't think just because you have a contract and they signed it and they agreed to it, that if you have a breach that, okay, we could just terminate easily. Then they could sue you for wrongful termination. It could be a lot. So just work with legal, know your rights that you would have, especially if you're going to be a foreign company working in a different foreign location or partnering with a business partner, okay? Anytime there's audit rights issue, we have to get legal involved. And this comes into play when they don't want the audit rights in the contract. They try to negotiate them out. I always say audit rights are non-negotiable. They have to be in there. If somebody wants to take them out, modify them. And usually when they modify them, it's not going to be to the benefit of your company. So I would say no changes, no exceptions. I would be a tough chief compliance officer, let me tell you. Okay, and anytime there's evidence of fraud or corruption, we'll have to get legal involved too. And of course, when you want to terminate, legal has to send a notification and meet all the legal requirements and stuff. And you may not be able to terminate immediately. It depends on the agreement. It depends on the laws in that country, etc. So the legal department will be your best friend. Okay. Do we have any questions regarding what I've covered so far?
Oh, we do, but I thought, when we get to the next poll, as we're running the poll, we can quickly chat about those. Okay, great. Okay, so why is the right to audit clause needed? I always get this from commercial people because they don't want to talk about the audit because they know that this is going to put a damper on the negotiations. And so we say, listen, we have to have this because we have to meet our regulatory requirements. And if we're not allowed to audit, how are we going to really be able to know that we're meeting them, right? We also want to drive continuous improvement. We want to demonstrate organizational governance, and we want to for sure be able to identify unethical or illegal activity to mitigate the corruption risk. So, and sometimes too, even though we do an extensive due diligence process before they come on and then continue due diligence and monitoring throughout their relationship with us, you still may not be able to identify a risky business partner because sometimes people have to be caught doing the improper stuff before you know. And a lot of people get away with it for years with the paying bribes and stuff like that. And then once they get caught, then it starts showing up in reports and stuff, unless you got like a tip from the hotline or something like that. But they could come out clean in due diligence, and then but they're still risky. But usually in the audit, we can find where those little risky business partners are. And sometimes there's some gray areas, but we haven't found hard evidence of corruption or fraud. It could be gray area stuff, like maybe a gray area example would be somebody who gave a gift, and we have a whole policy for business partners and what they're allowed to do, what they're not to do. And then we give that to them when they sign the agreement, right? And it's also in the training, the compliance training that they have. But say, for example, they will give a gift and they give like, I don't know, a box of tea, okay? And that may not be a high risk, but if that box of tea, costs, hundreds of dollars, and believe me, tea, I have witnessed tea costing hundreds of dollars. I don't imagine paying hundreds of dollars for tea, but like especially in Asia, yeah. So then that's against the policy. Also, too, one of my auditors, when he arrived at his hotel, he had a gift waiting for him. And it was a very expensive pair of headphones. I forgot if they were Bose headphones or one of those very $300. And he was like, what do I do? I said, give it back to him. Give it back to them, say, thank you, but we can't accept this gift. I say, then look for gifts because they're giving gifts to people. So we already knew that they were breaking the policy on giving gifts, Another thing that was, they gave somebody, I think it was a Chanel bag or something like that. So anyway, that's a risky business partner. I mean, they're skirting under the line and in the gray areas and stuff. And so we gave them some warnings. And when it continued, then they got cut. Too risky. Because it's like, what else are they doing? Are they giving money under the table? So anyway, we also want the right to audit clause in there to support compliance and regulations, and to strengthen our controls, protect our reputation and our brand. You cannot outsource your accountability. You can also source all the work, all the sales and everything, but you're ultimately responsible, and you have to answer to regulators, when something comes up. Okay. So as we're going on this poll question, and everybody can read that on the screen there, the question came up from one of our attendees in our webinar here, and they said, well, what if the Chief Compliance Officer recommends not to include an audit rights clause? What would you do there?
Okay, let me tell you. This happens. This has happened to me. Okay, this job is not for the weak or the meek. I would say this. So you have to see how comfortable you are and stand up. I have stood up to the chief compliance officer who made an exception. You know, I say no exceptions. And I had to stand up, and I had to say, you know, we cannot take the audit rights out because this is how we protect the company. And then how are we going to justify that to regulators when they come in and we say we audit all our channel partners, oh, except this one, and why that one? And then it have to be a good business reason not to. And in that case, the reason was because they were government, and it's hard to audit government. And I say it's not hard to audit government. We've audited government entities before. It's more problematic because you have more restrictions. Let's see what most people are having contracts. That's good. For those who don't have contracts in your agreement, I highly recommend that you work with your legal department, and you need to have contracts in place because you're just asking for a world of hurt.
Definitely. And look, you know, another potential is you might go to your audit committee or to the board, you know, someone independent where you can say, look, this is a real problem. So on the next poll, as that next question is going out, another one that has come through is, you know, with 1,000 business partners, how many do you audit each year, and how do you prioritize which ones to audit?
Okay, so that's coming up in the next slides. I do
Perfect.
Yes, it's coming the next slide. I do an audit risk assessment, and two, you know what, we audit everybody, but not all at once. We have a small team. It was 4 of us, 4, including myself, and to audit 1,000 business partners. So we break them up into different types of audit, which that's coming up. So everybody doesn't get an on-site audit because we physically cannot do it. We just cannot do it.
All right, so let's share the results of the poll here. About requiring contracts.
Yeah. That's good.
So
that's good.
68% of people have a right to audit clause and 18% don't. So there's certainly a lot of risk there for those companies.
Yes, for sure. And let me tell you, it's okay when you don't have any issues, but once you start having issues, that's when the right to audit clause, you're going to wish you had that. And I know it's hard working with commercial. Let me tell you, it took $55 million fine. That's what it took in order for people to stop fighting and having the right to audit. And did you know they still fight? I didn't want to make exceptions and stuff like that. I say no exceptions, but the chief compliance officer can override me. He normally doesn't do that because then he has to justify, why we're going to override people. I just say, you know what? I say no exceptions, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about why you made an exception to this for this one and not that one. Everything's consistent. Okay, to answer the question, I start off with third-party risk assessments. So if you guys are doing risk assessment, this is just a quick poll just to see who's doing it. And some people only do risk assessments during onboarding. When you have thousands of channel partners, no, this is an ongoing process. You have to have mechanisms in place in order to do it. To answer how many we do a year, we were doing before COVID, we were doing about 40 on-site audits. 40 on-site audits and about, I would say 80 remote type audits. Between the four of us. That was a lot. But we did have some consultants. We did hire consultants, especially for language skills. Okay, so a lot of people are doing annually, annually. Yeah, that's good. As needed, okay. Still a lot of people still only doing onboarding. You're carrying a risk because things change. And like I said, when you first bring them on, maybe then you brought them on 10 years ago. A lot can happen in 10 years. Adverse media, they could bring in new people who are making bad decisions. It could be not a good culture fit for the company where your culture is clashing with their culture, because they think that paying bribes is the way, when they wouldn't call it paying bribes, but greasing palms and giving a little extra to get business along is the way we do business. And then our company was like, we don't do business like that. We ask nicely but we don't pay, So anyway, so there are different types of business partners. I only listed 5 here, but all business partners are not created equally. Different business partners bring different kinds of risks. So you need to know what those risks are for the different types of business partners. before you engage in them. Even consultants can be risky too. Those are people who, they may not even touch your product, they're just giving advice or whatever, but their advice could be adverse to anti-corruption laws, especially if they're they're asking you to pay them extra money in order for you. Perfect example, you have like a FDA type violation in a foreign country. Okay, so this consultant you hired knows all the regulatory requirements that's needed. And so they say, okay, you know what? If you, like, their normal fee is, I don't know, I'm making up a number. Say the normal fee is $20,000 to handle all your FDA type of issues, regulatory issues. But they said, because you have a special problem over here, you pay me $100,000 and I will make sure that problem goes away. So what they do, they take the $100,000 and then they would give some to the official to make the issue go away and pocket the rest. And then now you're in trouble because they just made a payment, to make this FDA issue go away. So that's how consultants could be risky too. So you got to know the type of consultants you're dealing with. And then once you decide on your risk tolerance, because nobody is 100% risk free. I mean, there's a risk anytime you're dealing with third parties, no matter what country they are located in, but there's always a risk, even if it's small. So the stages of risk mitigation, you need to determine the business need, assess your risk appetite. I just said that. How much risk are you willing to take? Like how much are, and I always say, how much are you willing to bleed? Really, how much are you willing to bleed? Because if you have revenues, $100 billion revenues, you may take more risk than somebody with $2 billion revenues. Because if you get $100 million fine or a $500 million fine, that's a lot of money if you only have 1 billion in revenues or so. Or if you have 100 billion in revenues, then maybe $100 million fine might not be that much for you. You wouldn't like it, but it's not going to be that detrimental to the bottom line. Okay, then you're going to select your business partner. You're going to create a risk profile. We have a tool that does this. Like I said, if we have thousands, so we have to have a tool. And then you're going to perform your due diligence. This could be internal due diligence or external due diligence. I have another session on due diligence technique, but you may have to engage a third party for boots on the ground who's local, who could really do a deep dive and get into country databases that you wouldn't have access to being outside the country. So a lot of local firms can get into databases so that they can see stuff that may not even be publicly known. Okay, then you contract and engage, you monitor and audit. So I talked about this in that whole wheel. So this is what you're looking at when you're deciding on your business partner, and at the same time you're creating a risk profile for them. Now this is mostly after if you've already brought them on board, and you just have to just make sure that the partner that you're working with, they really align with your values. Where they're located and where they're doing business may not be the same country. They could be located, say, in Thailand, but they're doing business all across Southeast Asia. So you got to take into consideration all of the countries they're doing business in, and the corruption risk for those countries, for each of those countries, and build that into your platform. Usually what we do, all these little questions are in the due diligence questionnaire, and they're all scored and they get a number. And at the end, you'll have like a risk profile with a risk score number. And so it's based on these type of questions. Who are the customers? If they sell to government enterprises, that's going to be a lot more valuable information than if it's a private company, because when you get into government-owned companies and enterprises, then you're into like FCPA violations if they're paying bribes and making facilitation payments. And overseas, a lot of like the hospitals, I'm in medtech industry. So a lot of the hospitals, laboratories, clinics are owned by the government. So, and that's who we're working with overseas for a majority of the cases. Sometimes they're privately owned companies and laboratories, but most of them are governmental. Okay, are there any historical compliance issues? These could be initial red flags. You would be surprised. Sometimes people have compliance violations that's known, and then they still may be approved as a business partner because maybe that was 10 years ago. But then you have to ask yourself, who was it? Are they still there? What happened to them? Or why did it happen? Was it tone at the top? Because maybe that one person was doing improper activities, but doesn't mean that everybody in the company is doing it, or it could mean that's the way they do business at that company. So you have to know that. Then you have to see what are your obligations, and then how closely is your business aligned with them. Just are they honest and reliable? Can you trust these people? How much control will you have over them? When I say control, I mean, if they're a company that's larger than your company, are they going to listen to you? Are they going to want to abide by your code of conduct, by your code of ethics, by your compliance policies? I've heard people say, you know what, we don't care about compliance, and we don't care if we do business with you. That has actually been said before. It's like, okay, that should be a thank you, and that's usually bigger companies. And then also, if it's a smaller company that's depending on the sale of your product, your services, in order for them to make money and to stay afloat, that could be a risk too, because it's like they don't want to lose the business because they could lose the whole company. And so they may do stuff to meet the numbers, to, make sure to keep the agreement, make the sales and stuff. And so that could be a risk too. And the most important thing that every decision maker should have on their mind is, how lucky are you to be found at fault if they do something illegal? Are they worth the risk? That's what I always say. When people want to complain about having audit rights, I always say this, if they do something wrong, we're going to be found liable. Is this worth $100 million fine? Even if they're bringing in $1 million in revenue, is it going to be worth $100 million fine? That $1 million in revenue may sound a lot until you get a fine of 100 million. Then you say, nope, it's not worth the risk. Okay. So here's an example of a risk score point system. Like I said, all of those questions that was in that spiral will be formed into a questionnaire that you will send out. And then, and behind the scenes, not all the questions will be scored, but certain questions that's relevant to risk would have some points, like, and then we take into consideration the sales range, how much sales they're going to get, they're going to bring in, the responses to the due diligence questions, that's what I just talked about. And the CPI score is the Corruption Perception Index score. Transparency International, they're an independent organization. They rank all the countries worldwide. Then once you have your raw risk score, you can rank them into low, medium, and high risk. That drives your audit, because you're going to do a different audit for different types of risks. You don't have to do, we would love to have everybody have an on-site audit. But like I said, if you have 20 channel partners, okay, yeah, that's possible. But if you have thousands, there's no way you're going to be able to do audit everybody, definitely not in a year, but not even in 5 years. It might take 7 to 10 years to audit everybody. Well, unless you have a whole bunch of auditors, you have a team of 50 auditors, you could do some damage. Unfortunately, I don't have that many. I would just like 10. If I had 10 auditors, it would be great, but I have 4. The poll question: how many audits are being performed? And if so, if they're remote and on-site, or no audits are performed. Amanda, do we have any questions?
Nothing has come up yet.
Okay, I'm just checking the time.
I know, I'm keeping an eye on the time too. There's so much good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, and this is just a brief overview. I could go into each one of these sections. I could really do a deep dive, but this is just supposed to be an introductory session just based on what I do. I love my job. If you can't tell. Like Amanda loves audit. I love finding fraud and corruption, and So what are the results of this? I'm
going to share the results right now.
Okay. Oh my goodness, this is so great. That touched my heart. 58% are done audits. Let me tell you, but even if they're only remote, at least you have some visibility. Right now, I'm doing 100% remote audits because of COVID. We can't travel anywhere. There's too many restrictions, but hopefully I'm building the audit plan for this year. And then hopefully after Q2, some restrictions will be lightened and we can do just the most critical ones that we have been watching. And, I've been watching since the early part of 2020. We just haven't been able to get out there. Okay, when you're thinking about your audit program, this is what you want to look at. You're going to look at your contract. No, we're not going to test everything in the contract because you can't. I mean, you just can't. So you're just going to look at the crucial points, fraud risk areas. Make sure they have audit rights. If they don't have audit rights, you can't even audit. You can't even audit that person. So don't even try. I mean, it's a headache that's not worth having. You're going to look at your business relationships. Of course, you're looking at fraud risk, any regulatory requirements, and that goes to build your audit scope. But when you say the audit scope, we're only concentrating on controls that mitigate fraud and corruption risk. And usually we're going to audit travel and entertainment, expenditures, some sponsorships, places where they can hide it. Because nobody's going to be paying for this stuff out of their own pocket. They're going to try to make the company pay for it some kind of way. And you're never going to find a thing that says, okay, a payment for fraud, a bribery. So you have to kind of dig. And like I said, you're going to do 3 types of audits. You can, well, this is the way I do my audit approach. 3 types of audit, 1, 2, and 3. You're gonna have a full scope audit. That's a high risk audit for high risk business partners on site. You're gonna dig deep in their books, but it's gonna be very focused on those audit scope areas I said. Everywhere that fraud and corruption can possibly take place. And then level 2 could be a medium scope where you can do enhanced procedures, like a survey or something like that. Definitely a desktop review. You can pick some level 2 to be a full scope audit or, medium scope or whatever. So it's up to you. I always say, as the risk increase, audit procedures expand. Of course, you want to try to rotate your highest risk channel partners every 3 to 5 years based on your risk. And you're doing this risk assessment every single year. And then let me see, I think we're out of time, right? Are we right at time?
Oh, look, you can keep going. I think there's still 3 more minutes.
Okay, so basically you guys are going to get this slide deck. And so this is just some places where we commonly have found some compliance violations or corruption. And so this is just to give you some ideas of where to look. Of course, every partner is going to be different. Some people have good books. Some people have terrible books. I've actually had a company in Africa that had paper books, paper ledgers. Can you believe? I said, I haven't seen paper ledgers since I was in university, and I was in university before there was internet. That just tells you how long ago that was. I feel like a dinosaur when I said it before. People are like, who didn't have internet before internet? Anyways, these people were still on paper. So that was a shock. But these are some accounts that we commonly look at. Miscellaneous, anytime, every transaction has a place. If it's in miscellaneous, it has to be a one-off. If there's a whole bunch of stuff in miscellaneous, why is that? We always look at the miscellaneous, even if it's especially if it's a large balance, to see what they're dumping in there. So I think, let me see. And then this is some of the issues that we find. Most people that's going over to the 1s and the 2s, is where we're going to either we have to re-audit them or we have to make a decision if we're going to terminate or non-renew. The difference between terminate and non-renew, terminate could be at the end of the contract agreement, we terminate within 30 days, whatever is allowed by law. It's like a hard cut. It's a hard cut. Non-renew means that there's too many issues, but not enough that we think we're going to get into trouble with regulators, that we're going to just non-renew the contract at the end of the term. We're going to let the contract ride out, and then we're not going to renew it. And then where the gray areas, we do re-audits. And like we used to do 40 audits a year, and maybe we'll do 3 to 5 re-audits. If they fail the second audit, even if it's a gray area, that's it. We can decide to terminate a non-renew. Usually terminate is for when we find severe violations of the agreement or we have strong evidence. You're not always going to have evidence, but sometimes we do. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed my session. I hope you got a good takeaway. And Amanda, it's all yours.
Fantastic. So there are some additional resources that are going to be shared on the Auditopia website. Oh, I don't know if anybody else is hearing that weird echo that I am. And then also the feedback link. If we could go across one more slide. Yeah, there is an echo. Okay. All right. I might get Natasha to stop sharing her slides because we figured out that slide sharing is what's doing it.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get that to.
Well, if I didn't is this the last slide? Oh, I think it was.
I think it might be the last slide.
And also thank you. Yes. So.
Yeah. So if you could fill out the feedback link, I'll just mute Natasha and see if that makes a difference. It does. Okay. So we'd love you to fill out the feedback link, jump onto Auditopia, and you can also there get all of Natasha's contact details. So you can contact her on LinkedIn, her profile, all of her details, and make sure that you check out Auditopia. Now, for those people who are watching out there on YouTube, all of the resources that Natasha has shared today are available. You can join Auditopia free. It's a community for internal auditors. That's lots of great learning resources. We have our community events, and the recordings from the community events are available on our Auditopia website as well. So thank you very much. I'm sure if we could virtually applause, I know we can't in webinar mode, but a big virtual applause for Natasha. I think Natasha has a book coming out too as well, and a whole lot of other things. So if you're connected with her and following her on LinkedIn, you'll find out about all of the great stuff. We have more great community events. Those will be on Auditopia. They're not necessarily going to be streamed live on YouTube. But with Natasha's, she was a special case in everything that she's sharing with us today. So thank you, everyone. People are raising their hands for applause. Great, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. For those people who are in my time zone, good morning. We hope you have a great day. For everybody in the Pacific time zone, hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. For those people who are further afield, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, everybody. Stay well, and we look forward to seeing you again.